2,500 years ago, a general wrote a book that has nothing to do with money, and yet it explains, more precisely than any finance book ever written, why most people stay broke. Not because they're lazy. Not because they're unintelligent. But because they are fighting the wrong war, with the wrong weapons, on a battlefield they never bothered to study. Sun Tzu warned that the general who fights without a plan loses before the first arrow is fired. He said the greatest victories are won before the battle even begins, decided quietly, in preparation, while the losing side is still sharpening swords for a fight that was already lost. Now look at the average life. A person wakes up. Trades 8, 9, 10 hours of their one, irreplaceable life for a wage. Spends most of it before the next payment arrives. Repeats this for 40 years. Retires with barely enough to survive on. And somewhere along the way, calls this working hard. Sun Tzu would not call this a strategy. He would call it a slow surrender. This is not a script about hustle. You already know how to work hard, the system depends on it. This is about something almost nobody teaches you, how the wealthy think differently about time, risk, positioning, and power, long before money ever enters the picture. Because here is the uncomfortable truth. The rat race was never a lack of effort problem. It is a lack of strategy problem. Most people will spend decades fighting a battle they can never win, using tactics built for soldiers, not for generals. The wealthy understand something ancient. The average person rarely does. By the time most people realize this mistake, years, sometimes entire decades, are already gone. But there is a way out. Not a shortcut. Not a trick. A different way of seeing the entire board. Sun Tzu never taught his students how to fight harder. He taught them how to win before the fighting started. And in the next few minutes, you're going to learn exactly how that principle applies to your money, your time, and your future, starting with the one mistake almost every broke person makes without even realizing it. Before Sun Tzu ever spoke of attack or retreat, he demanded something far less exciting: know the ground you stand on. Not the ground beneath your feet, the ground beneath your entire situation. Where the advantages are hidden. Where the traps are buried. Where the real battle is actually happening, versus where everyone thinks it's happening. Most people never do this with their own financial life. They can tell you their salary. They can tell you their rent. But ask them where the actual money in their industry flows, who controls it, who multiplies it, who captures the value they personally create every single day, and the silence is telling. They are fighting on a battlefield they have never once studied. Take an ordinary employee. Talented, hardworking, reliable. Every year, they generate value for the company that far exceeds their paycheck. That gap is not an accident, it's the entire terrain. It's how the business survives. But because no one ever taught them to look at it this way, they mistake motion for progress. Busy for strategic. Tired for advancing. Sun Tzu would see this instantly. A general who doesn't understand the terrain isn't fighting bravely, he's just fighting blind. And blind effort, no matter how relentless, rarely wins wars. Here is the uncomfortable question most people never ask themselves: if I disappeared tomorrow, who would benefit financially from my absence, and who would suffer? The answer reveals your real position on the battlefield. It reveals your leverage, or the total absence of it. This is not about blame. The system was never designed to teach you this. Schools teach obedience, not terrain mapping. Which is exactly why so few people ever escape. But knowing the terrain is only step one. Because even a general who understands the battlefield perfectly can still lose everything, if he keeps making one particular mistake. A mistake so common, so invisible, that almost everyone alive today is making it right now without realizing it. Sun Tzu had a name for this trap. And it explains, better than any economics textbook, exactly why the rat race exists in the first place. Here is the trap. Not laziness. Not stupidity. A single strategic error, repeated by millions of intelligent people every single day, trading a finite resource for a linear reward, and calling it a plan. Time is the one resource no general can manufacture more of. Sun Tzu knew this better than almost any strategist in history. Armies that overextended, that wore themselves down fighting battle after battle with no multiplying advantage, collapsed even when they won. Victory without leverage is just exhaustion with better paperwork. This is the rat race, stripped of its comfortable name. Hours sold, one at a time, for wages that arrive one at a time, spent almost as fast as they arrive. There is no compounding here. No multiplication. Just repetition, dressed up as ambition. Think of two soldiers. One spends his energy attacking the same fortified position, day after day, gaining nothing because the terrain favors the defender. The other studies the map, finds the weak flank, and redirects his forces where effort actually multiplies into advantage. Same energy. Same courage. Completely different outcome, because one understood leverage, and the other only understood effort. This is the hidden tragedy of the average financial life. Someone works 60-hour weeks for 2 decades, genuinely believing exhaustion is the price of success, never realizing they are the soldier attacking the fortified position, while people around them quietly found the flank. The system benefits when you never learn this. A workforce that equates busyness with progress rarely asks who actually profits from their motion. But here is where Sun Tzu's thinking becomes dangerous, in the best sense. He never told his generals to simply work harder or fight longer. He told them to reposition. To find where a small, well-placed force could achieve what a large, exhausted one never could. This single shift, from effort to positioning, is the exact line that separates people who escape the rat race from people who spend 40 years running in it. And it starts with a principle so counterintuitive that most people reject it the first time they hear it. Sometimes, the strongest move is the one that looks the smallest. Sun Tzu made a claim that sounds almost mystical until you understand it: the greatest generals win their wars before a single battle is fought. Not through prophecy. Through preparation so thorough that victory becomes the only likely outcome. This is the exact opposite of how most people approach money. They wait for a crisis, then react. A car breaks down. A job disappears. An opportunity shows up, and they aren't ready, so it passes to someone who was. Then they call this bad luck. Sun Tzu would call it bad preparation. Look at how Warren Buffett actually operates. He isn't scrambling for deals during a market crash, he's been sitting on cash reserves for years, quietly waiting, because he already decided years earlier how he'd respond when opportunity finally arrived. The advantage wasn't built in the moment. It was built long before the moment existed. Now picture the ordinary version of this same principle. 2 co-workers, same salary. One keeps no reserve, no plan, no second skill, every month is survival, every emergency is a disaster. The other has quietly built a small cushion, learned one additional skill, kept their options slightly open. When their company suddenly restructures, one panics. The other, calmly, already has 3 moves available. Neither of them predicted the layoff. But one of them had already won that particular battle months earlier, without knowing a battle was coming. This is the discipline almost nobody teaches, preparing for opportunities and threats you cannot yet see, simply because you understand they are statistically inevitable. Not paranoia. Positioning. Ask yourself honestly, if an opportunity appeared tomorrow that required capital, skill, or free time you don't currently have, would you be ready to move, or would you be starting from zero? Most people are starting from zero. Which is precisely why Sun Tzu's next principle matters so much, because winning before the battle requires something the rat race actively destroys in people, the appearance of restraint, even while quietly building strength. Sun Tzu taught something that unsettles people the first time they hear it: the wise general hides his true strength. He appears smaller than he is, quieter than he is, less threatening than he is, while every resource he possesses is quietly being multiplied behind the scenes. Now compare that to how most people handle money the moment they get a little of it. A raise arrives, and within weeks, a new car loan arrives with it. A bonus lands, and it's gone before the next paycheck, spent on things designed to signal arrival rather than build it. This isn't corruption of character. It's an ancient trap, dressed in modern packaging, the desire to look successful competing directly against the discipline required to become successful. Sun Tzu would recognize this instantly as a fatal exposure of position. A general who reveals his full strength invites every rival to plan against it. A person who reveals their full spending power the moment they earn it invites lifestyle inflation to consume exactly what should have been reinvested. Look at how quietly wealth is actually built. Many of the wealthiest people in history, men like Carnegie, like Rockefeller in his early years, lived with striking restraint while their capital multiplied unseen. Not because they lacked money. Because they understood that visible spending and invisible compounding cannot both happen with the same dollar. Here's the relatable version. Two people earn the exact same income for 10 years. One upgrades their lifestyle with every raise, nicer car, bigger apartment, constant small upgrades that feel harmless individually. The other keeps their visible life almost unchanged, redirecting the difference into something that grows. By year 10, their incomes look identical on paper. Their actual positions are nowhere close. This is not about deprivation. It's about sequencing, appearing steady while your real position quietly strengthens underneath the surface. But restraint alone isn't the full weapon. Because the real threat to most people's wealth was never really external. Sun Tzu's next principle turns the lens inward, toward an enemy far more dangerous than any market crash, and far harder to defeat. Sun Tzu left behind one line that strategists still quote more than any other: know your enemy and know yourself, and you need not fear the result of 100 battles. Most people apply half of this. They study the market, the economy, the competition, and completely ignore the one variable that actually determines most financial outcomes, themselves. Because the truth is uncomfortable. For most people, the biggest threat to their wealth was never a recession, a layoff, or bad luck. It was an untrained relationship with impulse, the small, emotional purchase that felt harmless in the moment, repeated hundreds of times across a decade. Think of two people earning identical salaries. Same job, same city, same bills. One treats money emotionally, stress spending after a hard week, status spending after a hard comparison, I deserve this, spending after ordinary frustration. The other has simply mapped their own patterns, knows exactly which situations trigger impulsive decisions, and has built small guardrails around them in advance. 10 years later, their bank accounts tell two completely different stories, not because one earned more, but because one understood their own internal terrain, and the other never bothered to look. Sun Tzu never treated self-knowledge as a soft, secondary skill. He treated it as a battlefield requirement. A general who doesn't understand his own army's weaknesses, fatigue, fear, overconfidence, will be defeated by an enemy who simply waits for those weaknesses to surface on their own. Your own impulses are that enemy. Not evil. Not weak-willed. Simply untrained, and therefore predictable, which means they can be studied, anticipated, and redirected, the same way any strategist prepares for a known threat. This single shift, from fighting yourself blindly to studying yourself deliberately, quietly removes more financial damage over a lifetime than almost any investment strategy ever could. But even a well-understood enemy can still defeat you, if you move against it at the wrong moment. And timing, Sun Tzu warned, is where even disciplined people lose everything. Sun Tzu was obsessed with one idea that modern finance quietly agrees with: the same action, taken at the wrong moment, can lead to defeat, while that exact same action, taken at the right moment, can lead to total victory. Strategy without timing is just noise. Nowhere is this more visible than in the silent weapon almost no one discusses at dinner tables: compounding. Not as a math formula, as a battlefield decision. Every year money sits uninvested, doing nothing, is a year of terrain quietly handed to your opponent. Not lost through failure. Lost through hesitation. Historically, this principle decided wars long before it decided fortunes. Smaller forces have repeatedly defeated larger ones simply by striking at the exact moment their enemy was overextended, distracted, or unprepared, not through greater strength, but through superior timing. The size of the army mattered less than the moment it chose to act. Now bring this back to an ordinary life. Someone waits for the right time to start investing, after the next raise, after the market calms down, after life feels a little less chaotic. That right time rarely arrives on schedule. Meanwhile, someone else, earning the same income, starts small and starts early, letting time itself do work that effort alone never could. 10 years pass. The first person is still waiting for the perfect entry point. The second person's early, imperfect decision has quietly outgrown years of the first person's hesitation. Not because they were smarter. Because they understood that in this particular war, delay is not neutral, delay is a loss, silently disguised as caution. This is the cost almost nobody calculates honestly, the years spent waiting for certainty that strategists know will never fully arrive. But timing alone, without amplification, only moves you forward slowly. Sun Tzu's final major principle solves that, and it's the one that transforms small, consistent moves into something the rat race can never compete with. Sun Tzu never admired the general who won through sheer numbers. He admired the one who achieved a large result through a small, well-positioned force, using terrain, timing, and allies to multiply strength that, on paper, should never have been enough. This is leverage. Not luck. Multiplication by design. Most people only understand one kind of effort, direct effort. Work more hours, earn more money. But this is the soldier's mindset, trading force for force, one unit at a time. The strategist's mindset asks a different question entirely: what can I position so that my effort multiplies without me multiplying alongside it? Capital is one form of this. A dollar invested doesn't just sit, it works, quietly, while you sleep, while you're at your job, while you're doing anything else with your time. This is not exotic. It's the same principle Rockefeller and Carnegie understood instinctively, that money reinvested into productive assets becomes a second army, fighting battles you never have to personally show up for. Other people's time is another form. Every business that scales beyond one person is built on this same idea, a single strategist directing effort that multiplies far beyond what one pair of hands could ever produce alone. Systems are a third. A skill packaged once and sold repeatedly. A process built once and repeated automatically. Effort spent a single time, generating return again and again, the exact opposite of trading hours for wages in a straight, unmultiplied line. Picture someone who spends one weekend building a small system, a skill turned into a repeatable service, a saved dollar turned into a small investment. Nothing dramatic. But that single weekend of positioning keeps paying quietly, year after year, long after the effort itself has ended. This is the real difference between the soldier and the general. Not intelligence. Not luck. The soldier repeats effort. The general positions effort to repeat itself. And once you see this clearly, the rat race stops looking like bad luck, and starts looking like exactly what Sun Tzu would call it, a battle fought with the wrong strategy, by people who were never taught there was another way to fight. Sun Tzu never wrote a single word about salaries, savings accounts, or investment portfolios. And yet everything he taught about war applies almost perfectly to the quiet battle so many people are losing without realizing it's even a battle at all. You now know what the rat race really is. Not a lack of effort. A lack of terrain mapping, positioning, timing, and leverage, the exact tools every great strategist has relied on since long before money existed in its modern form. You know that knowing your terrain matters more than working harder on the wrong ground. That effort without leverage is just exhaustion. That true advantage is built quietly, long before the moment it's needed. That restraint, not visible success, is often what separates the people who compound wealth from the people who only ever display it. That your own untrained impulses are a more dangerous opponent than any recession. That timing turns identical actions into completely different outcomes. And that leverage, capital, people, systems, is how small, deliberate moves grow into something effort alone could never build. None of this requires luck. None of it requires a head start most people don't have. It requires something far rarer, the decision to stop fighting as a soldier, and start thinking as a general. The soldier asks, how much harder can I work? The general asks, where is my effort multiplying, and where is it simply disappearing? That single shift in identity, quiet, internal, invisible to everyone around you, is where every real transformation actually begins. Not in a sudden windfall. In a decision, made today, to finally study the board instead of blindly charging across it. Sun Tzu said the supreme art of war is to win without fighting. The supreme art of wealth is much the same, to position yourself so patiently, so intelligently, that success stops feeling like a battle at all. The rat race was never unbeatable. It was simply never explained to you as a war worth studying, until now.